In this video, I'm going to talk about people that dislike other people's choices and why it matters. So this is not just a problem that is specific to our little sub-niche within, tabletop gaming or within the world, really. It's a problem in all kinds of different things. And that problem is people who dislike other people's choices. We see it all over the place, don't we? We see it. There are people who are Ford people, and there are people who are Chevy people. And the people who are Ford people, they have you cut out a Kelvin, like a sticker, peeing on, the other guy's symbol, and vice versa. And they do that kind of stuff. I live in Wisconsin, and evidently there are certain bars way up in northern Wisconsin that in the winter, if you roll up on a snowmobile made by Polaris, and this is an Arctic Cat bar, well, that wasn't necessarily the best idea. Stuff like that. Every time every little thing like that happens, by the way, somewhere there's a marketing person who gets sexually aroused and doesn't know why. And they're just like, whoa, what's all, yeah. And it's because that's all marketing, honestly. All that stuff is marketing. And when people get really super brand loyal about stuff like that, to the point where they start to kind of butt heads, marketing people, they love that. So we've all seen it, at least you've seen it if you've been, doing this for any amount of time and you've been going to game stores. Somebody walks into the game store and maybe they bring in, let's say Malifaux. They bring in their Malifaux guys because they're looking for a game. Or maybe they're coming in to buy some Malifaux and they pick up the box and they're looking at it and they're like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, that's a big gun, whatever. And somebody will walk by and they'll just be like, Malifaux. Why do we do that? Why do people do that when they just decided to just immediately dislike somebody else's choice? My question internally is always, what does it have to do with you? Like, why do you care what I'm about to choose or what I have chosen? People do that all the time, and they constantly are like, oh, yeah, I don't play that game. And you're standing there with, $200 to $500 worth of it. And they're like, yeah, I don't like that. If you don't like that, that's fine. Where's the benefit in the derision that you put towards that? And then, of course, the person who's doing it. Where does that come from and why? What is the reason behind it? I have a couple ideas of why this may happen. They're not great ideas, but that's kind of the point of the video, is that it's not something, if you don't like a game, that's cool. You can not like it. But you can also just keep that to yourself. It's a better world if you don't push out so much negativity and if you only push out positivity. You might hate that game and don't think that it's good in any way. But if that person comes in, you're like, I really like how you painted the canopy on that. That's something positive. You can at least say that. There's something about the old adage of, if you've got nothing to say, nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. It's the same thing in much of life. But there are reasons, I think, why sometimes these things happen, and I'm going to try to go over them now. One of them, I think, comes from a place of fear. People will say, they will fear the possibility, like, well, I like to play this game, and that person's playing a different game. Did I make the wrong choice? I think a lot of brand loyalty comes from that. It does not matter in any way whether that person is driving a Ford if you like Chevy, but I do really believe that a lot of times, a lot of that real tight, completely irrational brand loyalty comes from a place of like, well, I picked this, but they've picked that, so either I'm wrong or they're wrong. Somebody's got to be wrong, which is obviously not true. The entire world is filled with gray. But the fact is that, if they picked it and they're right, that means I must be wrong. And it's just silly to think that way. But it's fear, and we as humans kind of run off of that very frequently. So I think that a lot of times that's a big thing that we see in the game stores when somebody sees somebody else playing a game they don't play themselves and they haven't picked it and everything, and there's a lot of people out there that will just be like, immediately, they're making a different choice than I am. I can't be wrong, obviously, so they must be. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from. But there's also, just specific to us, there's another reason. Another big reason, I think, is because we as a group, we play together, okay? If you're playing Malifaux and I'm playing War Machine, we can't play together with our two systems. They're not compatible. It doesn't work that way. So every time I go into the shop, let's say, and I see people playing games that I don't play, I have no opponents. So now at this point, I'm looking at it and saying, I have purchased and put together and painted these figures, and now I have no one to play with because everybody else plays something else. And then again, we come from that place of fear. So in that situation, it's very different than normal brand loyalty. You know, if I have a Chevy and you have a Ford, well, you know, okay. It doesn't stop either of us from playing and driving our cars or whatever. But in tabletop gaming, if I decide to start playing this really cool game that I think is super cool, but nobody else plays it, it's very difficult for me to get a game in because no one else is around to play with because they're all playing something else. So in that situation, I can see sometimes some people thinking, well, if I just tell people that their idea is stupid, maybe they'll flip over to mine and then I'll have an opponent, which is obviously not particularly rational, but that's where it's kind of coming from. The whole concept that we as gamers are all in these different little camps when we're such a small group of people is sort of silly. It's true. I can't play Age of Sigmar against a guy who rolls up in War Machine in his bag or 40K or Bolt Action. Totally, I get that. But there's nothing to say that we as a group can't be like, well, hey, I've got, at least in the situation with skirmish games, I've got 2 forces. If you would be interested, I could teach you how to play it and show it to you. You know what I mean? And then maybe later you'll show me, and then maybe both of us will start thinking about other games. It's totally, if we all played the same game, we would all have plenty of opponents, but it would be kind of dull. And that's not what our hobby, I hope, is about. We're about kind of trying to teach each other new techniques for painting, new ways to think about stuff, what I'm doing here. But we're also at the shops, each of us individually, hopefully trying to make new connections with new social people and kind of learn from each other, maybe make some new friends, all that stuff. And that's really, really hard when the first thing you do is kind of make fun of somebody for whatever their choice is.